Welcome to the intro training exercises for Sharperlight's Excel add-in for Business Central. Please follow the video carefully, and if needed, use the PDF listed within the description for further information. Exercise 1 has 4 parts, A to D. This exercise gives an introduction to the Training Excel workbook, a brief introduction to the Sharperlight Excel add-in, then we create Sharperlight value formulas with each part. All the exercises are to be done on the Excel workbook named Dynamics 365 Business Central Kronos AU Sharperlight Training blank. To get this workbook, go to Sharperlight's Manuals and Guides page and download the Sharperlight Business Central Training Exercise zip. When Sharperlight is installed, the Excel add-in installs by default. You should see the Sharperlight Excel ribbon here. Before we begin the exercise, we'll go through a quick introduction to the Sharperlight Excel ribbon. Sharperlight's main application is the Query Builder, where you can define and preview a query. Query Manager opens a window that lets you see all available queries in all workbooks currently open. You can create new, edit, or delete the queries from this window. In the Formula tab, there are 4 types of ND formulas: value, table, list, and sheet. These are all varying ways that you can output data into a cell constructed from Query Builder. In the Recalculate tab, there are 3 different types of recalculations. These different types are sometimes useful when you have long loading times or large workbooks. In the Tools tab, you can find a variety of buttons and functions including Drill Down, allows the selected cell to be drilled on if possible, Write Back, where you can define a write back, Other, where the notable functions of detach formulas and convert to delayed formulas exist. Detach formulas allows you to turn any Sharperlight Excel add-in specific cells back into static values so that you can share with others who don't have access to your environment. Convert to delayed formulas converts any formula cells to delayed formula cells, which do not refresh unless you specifically refresh with the Sharperlight Recalculate buttons. Lastly, you can log in or out with this button. To be able to interact with the data model, it is required that you are logged in, as they are typically licensed. We'll begin part A, where we will create our first MD value formula, which is used to create and execute a query to return a single value to a cell. Select the D7 cell and then click on the Value button in the Sharperlight Excel ribbon. The Query Builder window should open. If you are unfamiliar with Query Builder, we recommend you go through some of the available resources covering it. Otherwise, follow the video. As mentioned before, MD value formulas are used to return a single value into a cell. Thus, our query mode is set to Aggregation. Making sure your product is set to Dynamics 365 Business Central, you can then select your company. Query Builder for Excel can reference cells within the workbook. With the company filter parameter highlighted, navigate to the default sheet and double-click on the cell C3 where the company value for Kronos AU exists. Typically you would see the cell code and sheet code if you navigated to another sheet. However, the cell for company is a named cell, thus our filter populates the cell name. Now we want to select a table. Click on the Table Lookup button and under the Finance folder select GL Entry. You can highlight and click OK, or double-click on the table to select it. We should then see our selection pane, and mandatory filters populate relative to the table we just selected. Next, we want to add what we call a pseudo field, which is an artificial field that is set to be a prompt-only filter, meaning it can hold values within the filters pane but does not filter on the query. Right-click while in the filters pane and go to Other. These are the different data types for a pseudo field we can choose from. We want a date data type, so select date. We're happy with the default description of date, so click OK. Then click and drag the filter to be under the table filter. You can right-click and go to Options, or simply double-click on the filter to bring up the Options window. Change the name to Date and set the behavior to single values only. Click OK. The pseudo field should now only have a from parameter. Use the drop down on the from parameter and select equals def date, which is the named cell for the date we want to pass into the query. Now we want to set our filter values for geo account number. Our workbook has the value lists on the right side, so move the query builder window if you need to. Select and highlight the from filter parameter and then double click on the N7 cell. You should see both the from and to parameters update. If not, also highlight the to parameter and then double click on the cell N7. Now we want to set our posting date filter range. We want it to filter on the current month. We can do this by referencing our pseudo field date. On the from parameter dropdown, click and select it to @date. If the to parameter did not update, do the same. Then, on your from parameter, add OMS. This is a short code for on month start. This means our date range will be the start of the month for a given date up to the given date. For our outputs, we want amount. Find and double click or drag it to the outputs pane. Double click on the amount output or right click and go into the options to bring up the options window. We want to reverse sign our output, so under numbers options, select reverse sign. Click OK. This is our query definition completed for our value formula for the current month actual revenue. Click on OK, and if your query is unsaved, you will have a window pop up where you can name your query. Name our query X1 current actual revenue. Click OK. Our value formula now has populated in the cell D7. However, we want it for our entire column for revenue. Click and drag on our cell to copy the definition for cells D7 to D12. Like other functions, any variables with cell coordinates exist within the brackets, and as we drag down on our value formula, Excel correctly assumes the cell coordinate change. Next, we want to define a value formula for our current month actual expenses. It is a very similar query to the revenue. So double click on your D7 cell to open your value formula query. From the filters pane, you can right click and select copy to clipboard. This copies a query definition to your clipboard. Then close the window. Select the cell D16 and in our Sharperlight Excel ribbon, select value formula. A query builder window will open. We can then right click and import query from clipboard. Now we will have the query definition copied over to save time. Open the options for the output amount by double clicking it. We want to change the number options to be none. Click OK. Then update our GL account number filter parameters. Currently they are still pointing to the cell N7. Highlight and change them to N16. Click OK and then set the query name to X1 current actual expenses. Our value formula then populates in the cell D16. Again, drag the formula down to N20. We want our next value formula to be for year-to-date actual revenue. Again, we can copy to clipboard our first value formula query definition and use that to start. Double click on the cell D7 to open the value formula query definition and copy to clipboard and then close the query builder window. Now select the cell H7, then select value formula from the Sharperlight Excel ribbon. Right click in the filters pane and import query from clipboard. For this query, the only thing we want to change is the posting date filter range. Currently it is grabbing the def date start of month to the def date. We want the filter range to be from the start of the financial year to the def date. Different places have different calendar months from the start of the financial year. We will have to define the offset and then also apply the shortcode OFS, which is for on financial year start. We will change our posting date from parameter to @date 6M OFS. The 6M defines the offset being 6 months, being true for the Australian financial year as it is July to June. The UK would be at date 3M OFS and the US would be at date. Click OK and save your value formula query as X YTD actual revenue. Your value formula will populate for the year-to-date actual revenue. Drag the formula down for the cells H7 to H12. We want our last value formula to be for current month budget revenue. Select the E7 cell and click on the value formula button in the Sharperlight Excel ribbon. Our query mode should still be aggregation and our product Dynamics 365 Business Central. Use the drop down for company and select equals def company. For table, use the lookup and under the finance folder select GL budget entry. Add a pseudo field of data type date. Keep its default description of date. We'll drag the filter up and then go to its options. Here we'll change the name to be input date and select the behavior to single values only. Click OK. Then using the drop down, set it to equals def date. Now we want to set our budget name. Highlight the from parameter and then double click the cell B2. Add another filter for GL account number. If you need to, move the Query Builder window so that you can see the accounts list on the right. Highlight the from parameter for GL account number and then double click on the cell N7. Make sure your to parameter also is N7. Add another filter for date, and for the from parameter use the drop down and select at input date. Make sure your to parameter is also at input date. As we want to make our range to be for the current month, on the from parameter add OMS for on month start. Lastly, add our output for amount. Go to its options and set its numbers options to reverse sign. Click OK. Click OK again and name its value formula X1 current budget revenue. You should see the value formula populate. Drag the formula down for the cells E7 to E12. This concludes the training for exercise 1 for Sharperlight Excel add-in on Business Central. For more information and in-depth explanations, please refer back to the training PDF.